Welcome to the Resiliency Within. My name is Elaine Miller-Karras, and I am your host today. And I'm so happy to have Dr. Michael Sapp, who is the Executive Director of the Trauma Resource Institute, with me today. And Mike and I are going to talk about the Trauma Resource Institute, its mission, its values. It's an organization that I co-founded almost 20 years ago. I can't believe it's been that long. And we recently had a staff retreat. We had our employees come from many parts around the world that came to California. And it was a time that we really want to share with our international community the values that we have as an organization. And I think most importantly, I think the work that we do, we often say with everything that's happening in the world right now, and there is so much suffering. And we are an international organization working in many spots around the world where people every single day are at risk for their lives. That what else is true? How do we continue to nurture our civility, our compassion when we are looking at so much suffering, maybe within our own lives with just the windstorms that happen to us, as well as what happens in our world community. So, Mike, welcome. And what would you like to say as we're starting today?
Well, just what you said about the windstorms, it's been I think about all that's going on in the world. I was recently at a conference, and some of the words they used was, how do the question they were asking was how do we uh, engage and provide healthcare and provide just care to people in a turbulent world. That was the term that they used, turbulent. And I thought, ooh, that's what it feels like. And it has been turbulent. There has been so much suffering and distress. It feels like wherever I look, whatever news feed I see, whatever person I talk with, whether internationally or personally within my very small sphere of influence here in Upland, California. And it has felt overwhelming
Yeah.
at times. And what else is also true is we continue to step into that turbulent world in a way that is intentionally trying to bring light and healing and and alleviation,
Yeah.
which is not easy.
And I think that I think the not easy part, I talked to someone recently who said, Elaine, I think I'm losing my compassion.
Mm.
And, I sometimes feel myself, leaning into those
Mhm.
spaces when I work really hard and when there's so much suffering and so many sorrowful, turbulent examples of that. And thinking, gosh, we're working so hard. Will we ever make a dent into what's happening in the world? And then, Mike, you told me a very sweet story this morning. And, we work internationally. So we have projects that are not only within the United States, we're located in Claremont, California, but we have projects in the Democratic Republic of the Congo right now. In Ukraine, we have projects that are in spaces where there is much suffering. And so you told me a story today, because we often talk about, which helps us, I think,
Yeah.
when we're losing our compassion and feeling like, oh, I don't know if I can do one more thing. We often ask people the question, can you tell me a story of generosity? Sometime, a time in your life where you were generous towards someone, maybe someone was generous towards you, or you had an act of generosity. You witnessing or acting upon something that you wanted to do in your own life. And since we started asking that question, and I remember, Mike, when we first started kind of asking that question was at an institution in Los Angeles County that's very dear to us, which is Children's Hospital Los Angeles. And we have been so fortunate to be part of their Revitalize program, where they've trained close to 4,000 members of their staff in our model that helps with, again, cultivating well-being during those times of great suffering. And I remember we went around the room, and I think there wasn't a dry eye in the in
Mm.
the in the space as people were sharing amazing stories about children and families and their own generosity. And when I talk about these tears, we talk about sweet tears, not that they taste sweet, but because they nurture us. we can feel those gratitude tears, and they feel differently than when we're grieving or that we're in the midst of sorrow. So, saying that big lead in, Mike, can you tell us the experience you had this morning working with the Democratic Republic of the Congo? And maybe say a little bit about what we're doing. And we do it online, but what we're doing there.
Yeah, so we do it online, and what we're doing is we're teaching our community resiliency model, or CRM or CREM. So you'll hear me refer to it as CREM, so I don't have to keep saying the big long phrase over and over. But we're teaching those skills for self-care to a group in the DRC, and now are teaching that group to become teachers and training them to become teachers of the model, so that they then can go out into their community and share these skills with others in formal workshops and informally. And so to your point, Elaine, part of that training is having them themselves do the generosity exercise, knowing that they now will be equipped with another exercise that they can do with people in their community and their family. So we we were able to go around our small circle of participants, and each of them shared an act of generosity, similar just how you said, Elaine. Uh, while there were so many that were just beautiful, beautiful illustrations of generosity, there was one that I shared earlier about a woman who there had been a particular time of conflict and violence in their community where a family had to put their child on the side of the road and hide the child on the side of the road, uh, and then flee. Uh, and this woman found the child on the side of the road and scooped the child up and took them home and took care of this child for 3 days, and then returned back to the spot that on that road to find out where that family was, so that, now that the conflict in that particular area had moved on, found where the family lived, took the child back to the family, and the family had already started the process of grieving, assuming that their child had died. And so she said she was greeted with this huge expression of gratitude, tears, crying, and they were so thankful. And she said, now I feel like I'm a part of their family. And and there was something about that I thought, oh, it just was beautiful, because it wasn't. I think this is what I love about that particular exercise and the work we get to do is, in that story, it wasn't about denying and minimizing and ignoring the great distress and awfulness and horror that this community is experiencing. It just pulls in the what else is also true that often gets put to the side, ignored, or doesn't get seen as much. And so in that, I won't say little, that fairly big act of generosity, that's also part of that experience, where she was able to do something for this family that was profound, profound. And then we always ask in that moment, as you bring that to mind, what do you notice inside? What sensations are you noticing in the present moment, so that we can make sure that that sense of well-being is embodied? And of course, they said, oh, I feel warmth in my heart. I feel my muscles relax. And all of those things are designed to help us learn how to reset and recalibrate our nervous system and the nervous system's response to stress.
When you say that too, I think we often say in our organization, here you are, someone who lives in Upland, California,
Yeah,
talking to someone who is in the Democratic Republic of the Congo in Africa, and you each have a nervous system that reacts in the same way, whether we live in Africa or we live in the state of California in the
yeah,
United States of America. And I often think, and I've said many times on this show, that this is really the demonstration of our common humanity. And so when we say, oh, we may have different skin color, we may have a different religion, we may have grown up in a completely different ethos in terms of cultural norms, and yet when we have had trauma in our lives, that we respond very similarly when we've experienced stress and what we call like the dysregulated nervous system. But then we have this amazing capacity as human beings to also lean into our well-being by sometimes just simply remembering simple acts of generosity. And I think this is what I want to say to our audience today. As you're hearing Mike, share this, really sweet story with us, is maybe take a moment from your own life right now. And can you call up right now a act of generosity that you witnessed, that you actually maybe demonstrated to someone or someone demonstrated towards you? And just take a moment to think about that right now. And also to do this, the invitation that Mike had given to our friends in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and that was to notice the sensations connected to that. Because when we do that, like you said, we often say what you pay attention to grows. And we certainly can't take away that there's suffering in the world, that there's conflict, but we can have what I have come to say called nourishing moments that we can remember, like you said, Mike, what else is true? That with the violence that we know that's happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and they've had a conflict with Rwanda and their own, civil unrest, that we have met people there that are working diligently to help their community heal from the suffering from their generational trauma as well as their present trauma. And I think that inspires me um, when when I hear and speak to people around the world. And I think that's been one of the hard things for me, having founded the organization, Mike. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that. Is I am definitely I'm a citizen of the United States of America, but I also feel like I'm a world citizen because I know so many people in so many parts of the world now that when I hear that there has been an escalation of the bombing in Kharkiv or Kyiv, maybe in the past, before I actually went there and knew people in the Ukraine, I'd go, oh, that's terrible. I'm gonna, send them my thoughts. I'm gonna pray for them. It's more than that now. It's like, how are my friends there? Knowing that there's a whole community of people that have learned the community resiliency model there and knowing that they're actively working with teachers and children there with our model, it gives me a certain sense of okay, well, at least that's happening, even though I certainly don't have any power to end the war. Um, but I think that, these moments that we can help remind people of, and how many times have we repeated the story of the little lady in the Philippines? Thank you for reminding me what I already knew, but I had forgotten. And maybe that's what we need to do at times when we're feeling distressed. So, Mike, I'm going to ask you, and I will also share, I'm not going to just put you on the spot. Um, we've been working hard in our organization, haven't we?
Oh,
Yeah.
having just gone, right, met with staff for 3 days, our staff, uh, not to make it competition,
No.
but our staff is one of the hardest working staffs that I've ever met. We work hard. We work hard. There is so much that we do. We have this wonderful, s- relatively small number of employees and this larger network of independent contractors that really work hard to bring healing and light and help to areas of the world that are just hurting. Um, and and as leaders of this organization, boy, it's been a lot. It's been a lot. Um, it feels because the suffering doesn't seem to end, right? I remember a long time ago, one of our former employees used to say, "Well, I don't ever find a good time to stop. I just find a good time to pause." And I thought that helped me because I'm going, "Oh yeah, there's not a stopping point in the work that we get to do, but there needs to be pauses." And I think that for me personally, there's a cost to the work that we do. That, like you said, when I'm working with people in DRC and I see a news story, if I'm working with people in Haiti, we meet with these wonderful uh, what we call CRIM teachers in Haiti that we've been meeting with for a few years now. That relationship started back in 2010, right? That you,
During the
Elaine, had gone,
earthquake,
right?
right?
Uh,
The terrible earthquake.
but the kind of regular monthly meetings started a few years back that we've been doing. Well, when we have a hurricane going through that area, we immediately think of this and so that then wears on my nervous system. It wears on my soul. It wears on, I get that kind of, oh, I hope they're okay. And until I hear they're okay, I'm not feeling settled. And that's, and then there's the people that
That's
we
the
have.
world citizen thing, right? Because
Exactly.
it's like, oh, this is personal.
Yes.
It's not over there. And like
Right.
I can't help but say, they're very near Haiti is Jamaica, and Jamaica just had the worst storm of
Yes.
their history, where many people have died. I saw on the news this morning. We don't have a project in Jamaica, but I imagine if anyone is listening who wants to bring our model there,
Mhm.
to give us a call, and we will try to see if what we can do to help there. Because I know that after we were there during the earthquake in
In
20,
Haiti.
yeah, there were hurricanes have come
Right.
afterwards. And our group there has told us the skills that help in the recovering from the earthquake has also helped in the recovering from hurricanes. And of course, right now, Haiti is experiencing one of the worst times in their history because of the extreme political unrest and the violence. And we know when you talk to them every month, the amazing stories that they are sharing with us about not only how they use skills to help themselves, but to help their communities. So I think that, and I think that that world citizen concept is very much embedded in me so that also when I'm thinking about social policy for our country, our
Mm.
world, how do we maintain the integrity of what we need in the United States at the same times remember that we're also world citizens? I guess that's more of a rhetorical question. You don't have to completely answer the whole thing, Mike, but
Well,
yeah,
but I think
how do
that's
we end
it.
world hunger, right? It's like, oh my gosh, that's a huge thing, but people are working on it right now as we're talking.
Exactly. And I think as helpers, it's it is both deeply meaningful, deeply rewarding to be that world citizen, to know I got to talk with someone from DRC this morning and provide support and help. They got to share with me their experience, with then help shore up my strength. So there's this world citizenry that is so life affirming, and oh, when they're suffering, it hits, and it can feel for me very overwhelming, and the work, I just go, oh, we need to keep working, we need to keep working, we need to keep working, and then I get worn out.
And there's a cost to that,
There's
right?
a cost to it.
There's a cost. So in our models, the community resiliency model and the trauma resiliency model that's directed towards mental health professionals, we talk about these three simple zones. We have the zone of well-being. Some people call it the resilience zone or the okay zone. And that's kind of like when we're at our best self, when we go, I can manage the stresses in the world, I can manage what comes at me, whether people are angry or whatever it might be. And then we can go into the high zone where we're not necessarily our best self and we are agitated. We may say things we regret, or we can go into the low zone where we are disconnected and feel numb. And you and I, because of the being the leaders of the organization, we are very different in terms of what we call our default, because I tend to go high and you tend to go low. Would I say that?
Yes,
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 yes.
100%.
And so when we're talking about right now in the world, that many people that are working in social service organizations are especially having trying times. Um, we know that within the United States, regardless of what your politics are, and I don't mean this to be political, but people are living in a great deal of fear. People who are in the United States legally, people who have, even who are citizens, because they may have brown skin or speak with an accent. And I guess I feel very strongly about that because my mother came from El Salvador, that people are being picked up by what's called ICE. And that is causing much fear and harm in communities all over the United States of America. And I think that, are there ways that we can help people, right, stay within that zone of well-being when they may be helping people who are living in great fear right now? And I'm just talking about the United States, but we know that's happening in Haiti, that's happening in the DRC and Ukraine. And, we were just recently in Northern Ireland. And even though the conflict that, was 60 years ago, the wake of what happens in communities are not easily healed. And I think that's what we've also learned, so that can send you into your low zone. And sometimes when I see things in the organization, let's say, that aren't happening in the way that I'd like to see things, I can feel myself inching into my high zone.
Oh yeah.
And you inch into your low zone, right?
And
Talk a
it
little bit about it, you
right.
know.
And so when I inch into my low zone, I have a tendency to withdraw, to go quiet, to freeze, if you will, in ways that I don't want to. But that's the pull. And that's hard because then if people are looking to me for leadership and guidance, if I'm pulling back, that's going to create challenges for my
And
staff. That's
a vacuum, a space that's not
exactly.
the organization, right?
Exactly. And so I've had to work hard. Uh, I think successfully as much as I can, but clearly there have been times where I failed miserably. But I've had to work hard to really use the skills, and I share this with anybody I talk to that I use the skills all the time in meetings, in the work that we do, because I know that if I don't, I'm going to compromise the work we do. And if I make a mistake, I don't like making mistakes. And so I really work hard at not making mistakes. But when I do, I use the skills, I reset and I go back.
Yeah. And I think the point of I think one of the things for everyone that could be listening today, if you're running an organization or leading a group of people, that, you know, like Mike and I'm sure there are times that you get bumped into that high zone or bumped in the low zone. And then I guess the important thing is saying, how do I get back into our resilient zone? Because I think bumping out will happen to all of us. It certainly has happened to me. It happened with me during the last week. And then how do I get back in again? And how, if I get into those zones, those spaces of, let's say, I'm not going to speak for you, of course, Mike, but if I get into the high zone, I might say something that I need to apologize for because I'm going, this needs to be done differently. I can't believe this hasn't been done, blah, blah, blah. And then going, I'm sorry I talked to you unkindly. What do we need to do to repair?
Mhm.
And I think that's also part because even learning skills that I know our listeners have, it doesn't mean that we're perfect. I often say we're perfectly imperfect. And then how do we clean up the messes that we sometimes make when we go into places, high zone or low zone, that we're not showing up as our best selves? And I think that's also the question. It's not that we always can use the skills and they work every single time. But then when we kind of settle and, like you said, I love that the employee that said the pause. We sometimes need the pause
Yeah.
to reset the nervous system and to reset ourselves so that we can think more clearly, especially when we have a lot of things coming at us at the same time. And I think a lot of people that in social service agencies and also governmental agencies are experiencing that. I was recently in Atlanta, and sadly, many people that I talk to a lot of scientists, and they're having a very difficult time because of what's happening in our government today. And many of them have been dedicated public health professionals that literally have spent their life eliminating diseases within the United States and the world. And then, as one person said, it's really hard when, as scientists, that we have looked at the looking at the scientific truths, searching the evidence, doing, randomized controlled trials that we're coming at our best selves. But then someone comes to us and say, well, even though you've discovered scientifically 2 + 2 = 4, we're changing the rules. So now 2 + 2 = 5. Now that can be just, un, an unfathomable comment. But those comments are being made like that right now, which then is causing what we've talked about many times on the show is a moral injury
Mhm.
of that's at the very core of who I am and how I've dedicated my life to this country and the world in trying to eliminate, let's say infectious diseases. So, how do we stay and keep I guess our will to do good and our well-being when these kinds of things are being thrown at us? And I don't know, I know that you believe in the skills, but can you comment a little bit about that, Mike, in terms of, what else, can we do when many people in our country right now are faced in those situations? And as I'm going to say one more thing,
Yeah.
um, that because of the government shutdown that's happening right now, is that on November 1st, there will be millions of children in our country that will not have access to their SNAP funds for food And these, it's like I know that there are very wise people in the world that said how a country treats their most marginalized, those that suffer the most, really indicates the caliber of that country. I've always been very proud of America and what we've done within the United States and also through organizations like USAID that have helped people when they're suffering outside of our country. And that's changing right now. So I just, what's your comment about these kinds of storms? And, when the skills don't always work, what do we do?
Well, I think, and I know we're butting up against our break, so I will say my knee-jerk response to that is community, numbers, numbers. I think when I'm finding it hard myself, it's when I start to look around and say, oh, okay, this person along with me, as a community, what can we do versus me individually? Because I think that's the overwhelm for me at times. And and that's a very in the kind of foresty kind of answer. I'm going to start there, but I think that there are very specific activities that we need to go in and do. Yes, we need to vote. Yes, we need to do the things and be active in the things that we have power over so that we can change the system, because it's not about helping people become resilient so that the system can continue to be broken and continue to affect
Cause
horrible
harm,
things.
cause
Right.
harm to others,
That's
right?
not what resilience is for
No.
me. It's how do we stay in the game and regulate my nervous system so that I don't disengage if I tend to go low. How can I stay engaged so that I can fight the good fight? I can walk alongside and alleviate suffering and work for change.
Well, Mike, we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about something that you shared with me earlier today. And that is, oftentimes we'll hear people say, oh, well, my prayers and thoughts are with you.
Mm,
And you said something about action. And I want to explore that a little bit more
yeah,
because I've heard people say, well, your prayers and thoughts are just not enough. We need legislation for to end the gun violence we have in the United States, for example. I've heard that many times. So let's talk about prayers and action when we come back from the break. So we'll be back in just a few minutes. You're going to hear from our sponsor, the Trauma Resource Institute, and we will continue this conversation. Welcome back. This is Elaine Miller-Karras with Resiliency Within, and I am having I believe, a fruitful conversation with my guest, Dr. Michael Sapp, who's the Executive Director of the Trauma Resource Institute. We're talking about kind of turbulent times, suffering, but we're talking about the organization that we both have worked with and the kinds of things that we do to try to help with healing. But I think we're talking about kind of the large themes of what happens in the world. And one of the things that you and I were talking about earlier, Mike, is I know that you're a prayerful man,
mhm,
and that when I could think I'm a prayerful person too, and I know that sometimes when I get in those spaces when I'm praying, that sometimes my well-being starts to come back to me. And I think those of you that are, that meditate, I don't think meditate and prayer are definitely connected to one another. And our concepts of well-being and how we cultivate is also connected, I think, to prayer and meditation, because I think that when we pray, we can also sense what's happening in our body, and that oftentimes brings in thoughts of compassion. So, would you say a little bit about compassion and
mm.
action that you were talking about earlier today?
Well, yeah, I think yes. I think having worked in so many communities, having grown up from a particular faith perspective, that so many faith perspectives involve prayer, meditation, um, maybe at the very least, taking moments to reflect, to discern, to regroup. I say it that way because I think even for people that say they're agnostic, atheist, they don't have a particular quote unquote faith system, they still are very active in trying to find those points of reflection, recalibration, right? All of those things that I think prayer for many people serve and can do. And I think, but the rub for me personally, has been feeling like, while I think that is an action that for me really helps me and my nervous system, I've found that it's most helpful for me is when it also leads to action, physical action, intellectual action, whatever that may be, versus just holding up in my room, praying, and not stepping out into the street and doing work, if that makes sense. I feel like, and so I remember hearing someone recently, I so appreciated the way they said this, is that, we want prayer and policy change, right? It's not, because it can fall on deaf ears when I hear someone say, "Oh, our prayers and thoughts are with you." Yes, 100%. For me, when I hear that, it does encourage me 100%. And when it comes to certain things in our country, like the gun violence, I go, there has to be a different policy. When it comes to immigration, there has to be a different policy that honors the dignity of people. And that, I think, and that goes back to my core belief. I know that's one of the beliefs of Tri. That's why I think I align so closely with Tri, is that there is such a value of human dignity that if I pray for someone's dignity to be valued, I also need to follow it up with action. And I think that's the piece that I think I may have said earlier that you're referring to is
Well, yeah, and because I mean, wouldn't that be, instead of saying my prayers and thoughts, my prayers, and I'm going to be actively trying to help to change social policies so this never happens again.
right,
Right. And
right,
even, we can even say, I know, often say, because I do think that sometimes the prayers and thoughts, even though I guess, I want people to know that I am
right.
thinking about them, I'm often saying now, I want you to know that you're in my heart. And if there's
Yes.
anything that I can do to help, please let me know. And so that is another way that I know it doesn't minimize, it doesn't take away the suffering that many people have in the world, but I hope that they know that I'm engaged in trying to make it better. When I'm in my zone, right? When I'm in my
Right.
zone of well-being, because oftentimes we can't take
Mm,
fruitful action for dialogue and discussion if we're in our high zone and our low zone, because either we're not engaged enough because we're numb, or we're so rabid that people can't hear us because the anger is so palpable
yeah.
that it scares people.
Yeah.
And so, and having, been human, I know that I've been in both states in my life. And certainly I'm not proud of that. But then I guess that's the other reason that, because we're imperfect beings doesn't mean that we don't keep trying
Yeah.
to do better and figure out, okay, what do I need to learn? Even as an older person that's lived a lot of my life, lived most of my life, that doesn't mean I'm still not learning things of how to do things better and figure out how I can, you know, be more compassionate and be more loving in those times where I can say, quite frankly, I feel my smaller self comes out and I'm not showing up in the person that I'd like to be.
So you're saying I'm not going to be perfect.
I'm,
So
you
you're saying,
well, Mike, because I know that you know me very well. You know that already about me. So I'm laughing at about that. So do you want me to actually say it out loud?
no, no, that was a rhetorical question.
Well,
Well,
for all of you that may be listening that work closely with people, you may already know that about your colleagues, but sometimes you don't say it in person. So go ahead, Mike. Go ahead. Whatever else you want to say about me.
well, no,
Yeah.
no, no, no. No, I was going to say that, I was almost going to say, in all seriousness, humor, it matters. I
Well, it
think
does. And we know we're very humorous towards each other, and probably many people wouldn't even understand our humor that we
that's right.
have gotten us through many bleak times in our lives, right?
That's right. And I think that compassion, when I notice my compassion getting much thinner, um, it's magical for me. For me personally, it can be magical how quick humor can inflate my compassion. It's weird. I know that that's not for everybody, but there's something about humor for me that's such a resource that when, even in moments that feel so dire and dark, one little comment from someone I know that knows, that has a similar sense of humor, has a way of just going, okay, whew, all is not lost. I can see the light. I can see a step forward. and that is so encouraging to me because I think my compassion gets really thin, and it can, and to have, I think that's what I think I was alluding to before the break is I think that's where I need other people.
hmm To remind you.
Yeah,
Yeah, to
yeah,
help you. And I think we've helped each other many
yeah,
times over the years when we
yeah,
were feeling high, low, whatever, or
yeah.
in those zones, because I think that that social engagement piece and human connection is so important. And I want to share an experience I had last weekend. So the Trauma Resource Institute, we have been working with. We live, I live in Los Angeles County, and so this horrible fire that happened to our community, and two, major cities in our community, Altadena and the Palisades, are literally thousands of people have lost their homes. And I have had really the honor to serve people in both communities. And one of the things I say, because there's collaborations, um, organizations that have built up in both communities. And so I always like to say that we are here as an organization to help with our model for helping to heal the entire community. We don't say, oh, this collaborative is better than another. I mean, we really try to stay out of that because that's been created by their communities, and people have all different kinds of reasons, why they're aligned with one collaborative over another collaborative. But anyway, but we were asked by one of our crim teachers, Melanie, to do a little offering for a group of her friends in the Palisades. And I was so honored to go to a person's house who had her house survived the fire, but all around her house, there were many, many people who lost their homes and many of her dear, dear friends. And I think that, when we talk about generosity and kindness, when I was invited to come in to this small group of very close friends, what I left there with was their incredible kindness towards each other and their love for each other. And some of them even said that this horrible fire, where I think 10 of the people there had lost their homes, said it's brought them all closer together. And certainly there's a community of understanding. I certainly don't know what it's like to lose my home in that way, of being together, going through a similar process. But the house that we were at had apparently been a centerpiece of many of their community gatherings for this group of people. And there was a young man that was there that was one of the children, the adult children. He looked like he was about 20 or so. And he's listening to all the adults talking about their suffering and how they love each other. And then he and fires are random. There's no, when I've seen what happened in Altadena in the Palisades, I've also been up to Paradise when they had their fire there. And in my own community of Claremont, about 20 years ago, we had a fire here. It's so random, is that you'd see one house burnt down and then two houses not burned down, and then another house burned down. And so this young man said, he goes, I know this, I hope this is taken the right way. But he said, it's so interesting to me that this house survived. Because when I think about this house, I think about, being a kid and, having Halloween here, or think about a holiday celebration. And so what he did in that moment is he talked about what else was true, about even though his own parental home was gone, that particular house, the fact that it had survived, there was a meaning that he had ascribed to it that I would certainly never, entertain of saying it, but he said it and he can say it because it has meaning to him. And you could just see everybody kind of light up when he said that. And the kind family that, they are just so amazingly embracing their friends that have lost so many things, and that you could see that the people that had lost everything, they weren't saying, oh, you're so lucky that your house didn't burn down. That wasn't the tenor. And I really appreciated the husband and wife of the house, because they said, someone said, well, do you have, the guilt of surviving when others lost everything? And the husband he said this in such a wise way. He said, well, I don't feel guilt. And then the wife added in, she goes, no, I don't feel guilt either. I feel so much sadness for people that I love. And because we didn't cause that our house is standing and your houses aren't standing. But what they said, which in so many different ways is what you just said, Mike, is it was community, community, community. And that community, I felt like, can I be a part of this community? I want to come over always and be a part of the love that I saw amongst them was one of the sweetest things. That I think that's the other thing we get to see is when there's great tragedy and suffering, to see the love that comes together. And I don't want to say in any way that those folks aren't suffering and dealing with insurance companies and, the loss of dear things to themselves that can never be replaced. But to also see that other what else is true
Yeah.
is about that incredible love that human beings have for one another, and the kindness and generosity and compassion, because I think that keeps me going in doing the work that we do. And what you said, oh my gosh, there's another disaster. We have to figure out how we're going to respond. And I think, that is our strength. Maybe at times our Achilles
Yeah.
heel because we're working so hard.
Yeah.
But how many times have, we seen that in the world? And I really want to say to our audience is that if you're suffering right now and these kinds of experiences, if you've survived something difficult or going through something hard, is try to, maybe there's that one person, maybe there's that old friend you can call. Maybe there is a community group that you can join. There's so many different organizations. One of the organizations I want to call up right now is the NAMI, the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, and we are working closely with them in the Altadena area, and the people that run that are so kind, and they know that when the people have mental health conditions and there is a disaster, that they actually can be more affected, and they're offering their free support services to the community, and we're going to be doing some partnerships with them. And I just have so much respect for that kind of organization that realizes this. Really, they realize this 365 days a year. But right now, when we're in the midst of a disaster, those kinds of gatherings of community can be very important. So those of you that don't know about the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, it's a group of family members and parents and people that are suffering themselves that gather together for support, try to be advocates for one another, negotiating a system that right now is ever changing in terms of benefits and other services. And to know that there's NAMIs all over the country, the United States, and you just put it in Google and you will find, where there's an organization that's near you. And even if there's one that's not close, that you can reach out to them for help and guidance. I'm going to be having someone from NAMI come to the show and talk about their services because it's really important for all of us to know that this exists, because even when there's not great suffering like we're seeing in the world, that people with mental health conditions and their families who are supporting them, they can suffer every single day of trying to negotiate services and to help their family members that can have these kinds of conditions. So, Mike, I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts about, is there any other thoughts that you have about this community building that we're talking about?
So yeah, a couple. One, and to your last point, that it, and I think I've tried to emphasize this, is it's not toxic positivity, right? It's clearly acknowledging the suffering, clearly sitting with people. When we're in community with people that are suffering, ourselves included. And to be able to sit with people in their suffering, to me, that's part of of building and acknowledging dignity in that other person is and then also being able to help identify the what else is also true. And I was thinking about that, our staff yesterday got to drive into Altadena because again, we're doing a lot of work to support that community, and we got to go see a mural that was painted by local artists in Altadena, and it was a beautiful, beautiful mural, and I think it typifies, as you were talking, what I think about community is it had spelled out, I believe, Altadena, and each letter was painted with a scene by individual residents. Um, and residents are artists that are from Altadena locally, and they each captured parts of what they saw about their community, and what they wanted to commemorate about their community, and and so there was something about the individual perspectives
Yeah.
that being joined together
Yeah.
in this kind of unified image, that to me, it was very hard for me not to be moved by that, to say, oh, that's community to me. Community is not uniformity. Community to me is that in acknowledging the individuality, the uniqueness, and honoring thy diversity, but also being unified. You
It was
know,
really a kaleidoscope of
yes,
colors and experiences. And
yes,
I think we were all very moved. And I want you also to know that even though our nonprofit is located in Los Angeles County, is that many of our employees live in other parts of the United States. And so when we brought them on that tour, we really wanted them to see why we were working so hard. And because
yes.
we have been for the last 10 months now
Mhm.
saying, oh, well, yeah, I know I was supposed to do this, but now I have to go. I'm going to go to the Palisades and I'm going to go work with some teachers at a school. And, Mike and I have dropped other things that we were supposed to do in order to do that, as well as other members of our staff. So, and I think that's the other thing about community is that community shows up.
Mhm.
And I hope that people that we have been outreaching to have, seen that we've shown up and and I just have so much respect for the generosity that I've seen in the Los Angeles community
Yeah,
because it's not only the fire recovery, but our community is very affected by the fear
yeah,
um, that's happening. And again, I'm saying what we see. I'm not talking about the politics of it, but the fear that people have regarding the ICE raids and the indiscriminate way that they're doing it if they want to, take care of trying to get people to go back who've not been here legally, the way that it's being conducted is causing fear for our citizens, legal residents, and the entire community. And I think it's so important what you said. People that are undocumented need to be treated with dignity and respect and due process. And if we did that, then we wouldn't be seeing the fear. So it's hard to talk about
mhm,
recovering from the fires in Los Angeles without talking about what's happening in our country right now, because both things are so interconnected about causing so much suffering. And, frankly, I've been around this world for, a long time, and I don't think I've ever seen the degree of suffering that I've seen, or the turbulence as you started out our conversation with, as much as I'm seeing it right now. So I really want to say to everyone that's listening, wherever in the world that you are, how can you make it a better place? Is there a community that you can reach out to and embrace? Is there a friend that you may know that's suffering? Can you take dinner to somebody? I was really touched that in Los Angeles, there are, and I've seen this all over the country on the news, that food banks have been getting tons of um, offerings, not only with people bringing food to food banks, but also with donations, knowing that November 1st, if we don't do that in our country, literally millions of people will go hungry. So if you live in the United States and you want to do something that really has a tangible effect right now, think about donating to your local food bank, because that may be something that can be helpful. Because I think when you talk, Mike, about um, prayers and action, I can pray for the people that I know that have food, that are hungry
right.
and food insecurity, but my action is going to be I'm going to donate. And we know we have a local one that's not too far from us,
Yeah,
um, Foothill, right?
yeah,
And I just talked to my husband. I said, we're going to go down there and we're going to give a donation today
yeah.
because we know that's going to impact our immediate community when we are in Los Angeles County or in California. So think about doing that right now in your community. But I also want to say what else I'm talking about, NAMI. If you're really suffering and you're worried about yourself, because when I was in the Palisades, they shared with me they knew three people that had taken their lives. They feel as a direct result of the fires pushing them over the edge. We have in the US a number, it's called 988. It is 24/7, and people are there answering the phone. Or if you don't want to talk, you can text that 988, and you can text with someone if you're feeling like, I don't know if I can take much more. So please remember that 988. And I think at this time in our country, in our life, that it's really, really important that we do that. And um, the other thing is, we at our institute, we are offering online often. We have what's called a resiliency pause. Isn't there one today, Mike?
There
Um,
is
So
today
if
at 12.
anybody's listening and wants to, actually be talking back and forth, because here we are on our show, the podcast, and you're not talking to us. We're sharing with you ideas, but you can come to traumaresourceinstitute.com and it will give you information on how to come to our podcast that is at 12 o'clock Pacific time
Mhm.
today. I know that sometimes people listen to this after the fact. I should say what today is. It's October 30th, 20, 25.
Yeah.
Like, what year are we in? But if you are, you can definitely come to that as well. And also, you can go to our website, traumaresourceinstitute.com. We are a nonprofit. So, because I've got you here, Mike, if people want to give donations, they can also do it through our website. Is that
Yes,
correct?
please. Yes,
Because
please.
we give how many thousands of dollars of scholarships did we give last year?
Ooh, over $60,000. I think we're on track to exceed that this year.
Oh, is that okay? So that's $60,000 of scholarships to take our trainings.
Mhm.
So if you want to become a community resiliency model teacher, if you want to come to a workshop and you don't have the funds, we do scholarships so that we do not turn anyone away.
Yeah.
So Mike, I want to make sure that you get some final words. This
Mm.
hour has gone by very quickly.
I think one of the other stories that was shared by one of the other people this morning was a very simple act of generosity that when they were sick, their neighbor came and cooked them a meal.
Yeah.
And to your point, Elaine, there are these profound acts of generosity, and there are what seems like minor acts of generosity, but they're acts of generosity. And I think when we do that, we are um, we are acting in community. And one of the things at this conference I went to last week, I talked about the turbulence. One of them said, "Think globally, act locally." And I thought that was such a wonderful way of thinking of it because yes, I work in an organization where we do both. And if I ever feel like the problem feels too big, what can I do for my neighbor? What can I do for that person that's down the street? What can I do for that person that just is not feeling well? Can I just give them a call? Maybe that's an act of generosity. And I just think acts of generosity build and strengthen community.
And I just want to say we have generosity circuits in our brain.
Mhm.
The work of Dr. Richard Davidson has illuminated that. So if you come and take one of our workshops, we talk about his work, which is really
Sure.
powerful.
Yeah.
And so as we're ending today, I just want to say to our community, remember what else is true. If you're suffering, remember the 988 number and remember those acts that you've done for others, that people have done towards you. And just even, those witnessing acts. I sometimes just turn on a sappy TV program and that makes me feel a little bit better. Even if it's a total fiction, it sometimes brings something to my heart. So until next time, this is Elaine Miller Karras signing off for Resiliency Within.